The Egyptian president firmly rejects any renewed military occupation of Gaza. The Turkish foreign minister expresses appreciation for Egypt, Qatar and the United States' efforts toward a Gaza ceasefire. And US President and his Russian counterpart to meet in Alaska on August 15th. These were the headlines, the news in detail. Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has rejected any renewed military occupation of Gaza during talks with Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan, urging a ceasefire, aid access and the release of detainees. In Cairo, President Sisi told Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan that Egypt rejects any military re-entry into Gaza. He called for an immediate ceasefire, urgent humanitarian aid and the release of detainees, condemning the forced displacement of Palestinians. The two leaders also discussed Libya, Syria and Sudan, stressing sovereignty and territorial integrity. They highlighted the 2024 Strategic Cooperation Agreement and set a goal of $15 billion in trade, urging more Turkish investments in Egypt. Egypt's Foreign Minister Badr Abdulati has met his Turkish counterpart Hakan Fidan in New Alamein to discuss bilateral ties and urgent development in Gaza. In New Alamein city, Egypt's Foreign Minister Badr Abdulati held talks with the Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan on regional and international issues of mutual concern. The discussions covered the Gaza crisis, bilateral relations and ways to address regional challenges. The meeting underscored both countries' commitment to dialogue and cooperation in strengthening diplomatic ties. Egypt's Foreign Minister Badr Abdulati says Cairo and Ankara share a strategic vision for addressing regional crises with a united stance on Gaza. At a joint press conference, Foreign Minister Badr Abdulati said talks with his Turkish counterpart focused on coordinated efforts to boost security and stability. Abdulati briefed Turkey on Egypt's push to halt hostilities in Gaza, condemning Israeli expansion and urging the lifting of all crossing restrictions to allow aid in. Both sides rejected forced Palestinian displacement and called for pressure to reverse Israeli occupation plans. They also reaffirmed support for Syria's territorial integrity, condemned Israeli aggression there, and stressed political and military solutions in Libya, Lebanon, and Sudan. On his part, Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan has accused Israel of blocking Gaza's ceasefire efforts, praising Egypt's role in mediation. Speaking in New Alamein city, Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan thanked Egypt, Qatar and the United States for their efforts towards a Gaza ceasefire while accusing Israel of obstructing these initiatives. At a joint press conference with Egypt's Foreign Minister, Fidan said the Palestinian cause is now a global priority, rejecting Israel's attempts to occupy Gaza and condemning massacres there. Both ministers pledged to oppose Palestinian displacement, vowed coordination on the Palestinian cause, and condemned Israeli expansionist policies. They also reaffirmed joint efforts to stabilize Libya and Sudan and praised Egypt's role in facilitating aid to Gaza.
Ancak tüm bu çabalara karşı İsrail'in ateşkes girişimlerini ısrarla sabote ettiğini de görüyoruz.
The Arab Islamic Ministerial Committee has condemned Israel's plan to impose full military control over Gaza, calling it a violation of international law. Representing over 20 nations and major organizations, the Arab Islamic Ministerial Committee denounced Israel's declared intent to take full military control of Gaza as a grave escalation aimed at cementing illegal occupation. The committee accused Israel of killings, starvation, forced displacement, land annexation, and settler violence, acts it said may amount to crimes against humanity. It demanded an end to the Israeli aggression, full humanitarian access, and support for the ceasefire and reconstruction. The statement reaffirmed commitment to the two-state solution, called for holding Israel accountable, and urged urgent international action to stop further atrocities and achieve a just peace. UNRWA says Gaza residents face a critical shortage of hygiene supplies, with soap now nearly impossible to obtain. The UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees has confirmed that Gaza's population is suffering a severe shortage of essential hygiene items, warning that access to soap has become nearly impossible. UNRWA stressed that large-scale delivery of such aid can only be conducted through the United Nations, including its own operations. It said no humanitarian aid, including medicine and medical supplies, has entered Gaza for more than 5 months due to restrictions imposed by the occupation. U.S. Middle East envoy will meet Qatar's Prime Minister in Ibiza to discuss ending the Gaza war and freeing detainees. Axios reports that U.S. President Donald Trump's Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff is set to meet Qatari Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani on Spain's island of Ibiza. The talks will center on ending the Gaza war and securing the release of remaining detainees. Sources say a new joint Egyptian-Qatari proposal for a comprehensive diplomatic resolution may be presented, a plan that could delay Israel's push for a renewed ground invasion of Gaza City, one of the lost areas outside Israeli control. Hamas sources say talks are underway to prevent a full Israeli takeover of Gaza, with mediators working on a broad deal. The Israeli daily Yadda'ut Ahronot reports, citing Hamas sources, that intensive negotiations are ongoing with Israel through mediators to avert a large-scale Israeli control of the Gaza Strip. The proposed deal under discussion includes a ceasefire, full Israeli withdrawal, the release of all prisoners, disarmament of Gaza, and the relocation of senior Hamas military leaders abroad. It would also establish a civilian leadership to govern the Strip alongside a professional police force.
والله العظيم ولا حبة رز، والله العظيم ولا حبة عدس. ما فيش أكل، ما فيش شرب، عندي بنت 2.5 صارت تطلع.
10 people, most waiting for aid, have been killed in Israeli strikes and gunfire across Gaza, according to Palestinian Civil Defense. Palestinian Civil Defense spokesperson Mahmoud Basal told AFP that Israeli forces killed at least 10 people in separate incidents across the Gaza Strip. 6, including a child, died and 30 were wounded when troops targeted crowds near aid distribution points on Salah ad-Din Road, south of Wadi Gaza Bridge. 2 more, including a woman, were killed near an aid center in northwest Rafah. Basal said the victims were mostly waiting for humanitarian assistance when they came under fire. The Palestinian presidency has warned that Israeli plans to reoccupy Gaza and annex other territories will destroy prospects for stability. Presidential spokesperson Nabila Bourdina said Israeli policies to reoccupy Gaza, annex the West Bank and Judea's occupied Jerusalem will shut all doors to achieving security and stability in the region and beyond. He stressed that Gaza is an inseparable part of the state of Palestine alongside Jerusalem and the West Bank, and that no Palestinian state can exist without it. Bourdina rejected any notion of a separate state in Gaza. The UN Security Council's session on Israel's plans to fully occupy Gaza has been postponed to Sunday. Media reports say the emergency UN Security Council meeting, originally set for Saturday, will now be held on Sunday to discuss Israel's declared plan to fully occupy Gaza. The session was requested by the United Kingdom, Denmark, France, Greece, and Slovenia, and supported by Russia, China, Somalia, Algeria, Pakistan, Guinea, South Korea, and Sierra Leone. All council members backed holding the meeting except the United States, which opposed it.
中方将继续各方一道，为促进第1540号决议有效执行，完善国际防扩散体系，加强防扩散全球治理。
And now, live broadcasts coverage over central London, where supporters of Palestine Action and the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign are holding simultaneous protests today. As we can see in our live broadcast, Palestine Action activists are staging direct actions aimed at provoking mass arrests, hoping to overwhelm police resources and pressure the UK government to lift its ban on the group. At the same time, supporters of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign are preparing to take part in a large-scale march through the city, calling for an end to Israel's ongoing offensive in Gaza. To recap things so far, Egypt As we're seeing in our broadcasted live, pro-Palestine protests rock central London amid mass marches and police shutdown, and much more anticipated in the coming hours. And to recap things so far, Egypt's President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has firmly rejected any renewed military occupation of Gaza during recent talks with Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan. Speaking in Cairo, Sisi called for an immediate ceasefire, urgent humanitarian aid access, and the release of detainees while condemning the forced displacement of Palestinians. They also addressed broader regional issues including Libya, Syria and Sudan, emphasizing the importance of respecting sovereignty and territorial integrity. The UK, alongside four of its key allies, Australia, Germany, Italy and New Zealand, has issued a joint statement condemning Israel's decision to take full control of Gaza City as part of new large-scale military operation. The foreign ministers of these nations warned that the move will only worsen the already catastrophic humanitarian crisis and could put the lives of hostages at serious risk. This statement follows the approval by Israel's Security Cabinet of a plan to fully control Gaza City. Earlier, the Israeli Prime Minister's office unveiled a 5-step strategy outlining its intention to end the conflict in Gaza by taking comprehensive control of the area. In parallel, Egypt's Foreign Minister Badr Abdulati met with his Turkish counterpart in New Alamein city to discuss bilateral ties and pressing developments in Gaza. The two ministers underlined their shared strategic vision to tackle regional crises with a united stance on ending hostilities in Gaza. Abdulati briefed Turkey on Egypt's efforts to halt violence, condemning Israeli expansion and calling for the lifting of all crossing restrictions to allow humanitarian aid to reach those in need. Both sides rejected forced Palestinian displacement and demanded international pressure to reverse Israeli occupation plans. Meanwhile, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugee UNRWA has warned of a critical shortage of hygiene supplies in Gaza, with becoming nearly impossible to obtain. The agency stressed that large-scale aid deliveries, including medicine and medical supplies, have not entered Gaza for more than 5 months due to restrictions imposed by the Israeli occupation. The UK Prime Minister has announced that Britain will take the historic step of recognizing the state of Palestine this September unless Israel takes meaningful action to end the appalling situation in Gaza. Under growing domestic and international pressure amid worsening humanitarian conditions in Gaza, Prime Minister Keir Starmer convened a rare summertime cabinet meeting to discuss the crisis. This came shortly after talks with US President Donald Trump at his Scottish golf course, where they addressed the ongoing humanitarian emergency. Starmer said that the UK will formally recognize a Palestinian state before the United Nations General Assembly in September, unless the Israeli government takes substantive steps to end the appalling situation in Gaza, agrees to a ceasefire and commits to a long-term sustainable peace, reviving the prospect of two-state solution. He emphasized that this must include allowing the UN to resume aid deliveries and a clear commitment from Israel that there will be no annexation in the West Bank. Starmer also reiterated UK demands that Hamas release all hostages, agree to a ceasefire, disarm and accept that they will have no role in governing Gaza moving forward. In the meanwhile, the Israeli occupation army is preparing to take full control of Gaza City while pledging to provide humanitarian aid to civilians outside active combat zones, according to a statement outlining Israel's principles for ending the war. However, the UK and 4 of its allies, Australia, Germany, Italy and New Zealand, have strongly rejected this plan. They warned it risks endangering the lives of hostages and causing mass displacement of civilians. The statement also condemned the plan for potentially violating international humanitarian law, highlighting that any annexation of settlement expansion breaches international law. In a separate statement, Starmer condemned Israel's decision to escalate its offensive in Gaza, calling it wrong and urging immediate reconsideration. He said this action will do nothing to end the conflict or secure the release of hostages would only bring more bloodshed. Some have concluded every day the humanitarian crisis in Gaza worsens and hostages held by Hamas endure killing and inhumane conditions. What we need solution. Still with our broadcast live from London and reviewing and recapping our news on the diplomatic front. U.S. Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff is scheduled to meet Qatar's Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani on the Spanish island of Ibiza. Their talks will focus on efforts to end the Gaza war and secure the release of detainees. Sources indicate that a new joint Egyptian-Qatari diplomatic proposal may be presented, potentially delaying Israel's planned ground invasion of Gaza City, one of the last remaining areas outside Israeli control. Additionally, according to the Israeli daily Yadda'ut Ahronot, citing Hamas sources, ongoing negotiations aim to prevent a full Israeli takeover of Gaza. The proposal reportedly includes a ceasefire, full Israeli withdrawal, the release of all prisoners, disarmament of Gaza, and relocation of senior Hamas military leaders abroad. The plan would also establish a civilian leadership and a professional police force to govern the Strip. Many of Israel's closest allies are expected to condemn the decision to escalate the conflict as they continue to push for an end to the war and urgent measures to address the worsening humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Meanwhile, within Israel, a significant number of retired security officials, including former heads of intelligence agencies, have taken a rare public step by issuing a joint letter to U.S. President Donald Trump. In their letter, they urge President Trump to pressure Prime Minister Netanyahu to bring the war to a halt. One of the letter's signatories, former head of Israel's domestic intelligence agency, Ami Aylon, told the BBC that further military action would be ineffective. He said, from the military point of view, Hamas is totally destroyed. On the other hand, as an ideology, it is gaining more power among the Palestinian people within the wider Arab world and across the Islamic world. Aylon added, the only way to defeat Hamas ideology is to present a better future. These latest developments follow the breakdown of indirect talks with Hamas over a ceasefire and hostage release deal. Recently, Palestinian armed groups released 3 videos showing 2 Israeli hostages looking weak and emaciated, highlighting the urgency of resolving the crisis. The Israeli occupation army has previously refrained from taking control of certain areas in Gaza, including central parts of the city, due to concerns that living hostages are being held there. As we see in our live broadcast from London, the pro-Palestine Protests are rocking the central of London, and there are much, as we see, there are many of the sit-ins for protesters who are carrying some of the slogans and pictures, and some we can see now the police and yes, as these diplomatic efforts unfold, the region remains tense with urgent calls for peace and humanitarian relief growing louder. And it seems like police have arrested someone, as it shows in the live here and the broadcast, while the protesters are having a kind of sit-in in the central London. Mass marches are expected at these upcoming hours. I guess we'll be bringing you live updates as these events unfold. Now we move to the latest developments on the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. U.S. President Donald Trump has announced a meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin on August 15th in Alaska to negotiate an end to the conflict with Ukraine. Trump revealed on social media that all parties, including Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, were nearing a ceasefire deal, potentially requiring Ukraine to cede significant territory. The Kremlin confirmed the summit with Putin's aide, Yuri Yashakov, describing it as a challenging but active effort to find a long-term peaceful solution. Trump indicated that the deal might involve territorial exchanges benefiting both sides.
You don't have a problem with Russia. We have.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has declared firmly that Ukraine will never cede any territory to Russia and insisted that any peace negotiations must include Kiev. His remarks come as U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin prepare for a summit in Alaska amid reports of a Russian proposal to halt the conflict in exchange for control over eastern Ukraine. Zelensky emphasized that Ukraine's constitution protects its territorial integrity and that any peace deal excluding Ukraine or against its interests would undermine peace itself. While open to genuine peace efforts, he condemned proposals allowing Russia to retain occupied regions, including Donbas and Crimea, stressing that such concessions are unacceptable without Ukraine's consent.
І саме це проблема, а не щось інше. Президент Трамп оголосив про...
That brings us to the end of our news bulletin. Here is what we've been covering. The Egyptian president firmly rejects any renewed military occupation of Gaza. The Turkish foreign minister expresses appreciation for Egypt, Qatar, and the United States' efforts towards a Gaza ceasefire. And U.S. President and his Russian counterpart to meet in Alaska on August 15th. This concludes our news bulletin for the hour. Don't forget to follow Qnews on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at Qnews EGY to stay informed. Many thanks for watching and stay tuned for the upcoming updates on Qnews.